cry here, man. I remember that bus banquet myself, obviously, and was blessed to actually be a pallbearer in my bus captain's funeral a couple years ago. But anyway, Judges chapter 6. Judges chapter 6. If you have your Bible with you, I'll just read a few scriptures here, then kind of get into my topic or for this morning. Judges chapter 6, the story of Gideon. And in verse 32, I'll just start reading. It says, "Therefore in that day he called him Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal plead against him, because he hath thrown down his altar. Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east were gathered together, and went over and pitched in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew the trumpet, and Ebenezer was gathered after him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who also were gathered after him. And he sent messengers unto Asher, and unto Zebulun, and unto Naphtali. And they came up to meet them. And Gideon said unto God, If thou wilt save Israel by mine hand, and as thou hast said, behold, I will put a fleece of wool in the floor, and if the dew be on the fleece only, and it be dry upon all the earth beside, then shall I know that thou wilt save Israel by my hand, as thou hast said. And it was so. For he rose up early on the morrow, and thrust the fleece together, and wringed the dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. And Gideon said unto the Lord, Let not thine anger be hot against me. I will speak but this once. Let me prove, I pray thee, but this once with the fleece. It's actually twice now, but anyway. Let it now be dry only upon the fleece, and upon all the ground let there be dew. And God did so that night, for it was dry upon the fleece only, and there was dew on all the ground. And again, look, familiar story. Gideon's one of those characters in the Bible, if you would, that if you're in church any stretch of time, you're going to come across a story, because it's very unique in the Bible, where he petitions God for maybe a little proof as he comes to enter into a big decision. And actually, if you go a little bit farther back in chapter 6, he kind of already did this once with God, about God wanting him to kind of start this process and be the man to take down the Midianites, and Gideon wasn't ready. And so Gideon kind of asked for a sign, and God gave him a sign. He took 10 men, and he tore down the altar, and so forth, and they come there. And then ultimately, we know the rest of the story. God kind of does the same thing to Gideon in chapter 7 and following, right? Where, hey, you got this many men, we're going to get rid of them. They're scared. We got this many men, and we're going to get rid of them. If they don't drink the water properly, you're going to end up with like 300 guys, some trumpets, some pitchers, some lights, and have fun, good luck. And it's a tremendous story. And, when Johnny came to me a couple weeks ago about just sharing some things on my heart and such, he was very specific in that he wanted me to talk about decision making, I guess would be the way of putting it, and how God led myself and my family to make, move to Fort Worth, Texas, coming up tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday. Still kind of debating what day take off, but things don't always go to plan. That's a whole nother Bible lesson. But the Lord, if you didn't know, the Lord has opened up an opportunity for me to be an athletic director, teaching coach at a Christian school in Weatherford, Texas, just a little bit outside of Fort Worth. And I'm excited to go. Obviously, there's some sadness and emotions and stuff about leaving, but it's a pretty big decision. And as men, one of the things we have to do, much like Gideon, even like myself now, is you got to make decisions. And obviously, some decisions are a little more important than others. But ultimately, decision making is a big part of our lives. And man, there are a lot of factors that go into every decision. As God leads us into opportunities and stuff, you've got to be ready for it.
Amen.
And I think a lot of times we only look at the decision, and we miss so many things that kind of maybe have to happen before you get to that decision. And so I want to share some things and some testimony and such that have helped me through this process these really past few months and such. But if you don't mind, I'd like to pray real quick, kind of calm my nerves, and then we'll continue on. Father, I pray just help me this morning, help me to just share with what you've done in my life, and my family's life, these past few months as we have made this huge decision, Lord. And I just pray that it'd be a blessing to these men, and that there might be something from my testimony and these thoughts and your word that would just go with them throughout the day and challenge them to draw closer to you. And Lord, we love you. Amen.
Amen.
And so maybe, I guess my testimony with this whole process probably goes back to probably around Thanksgiving. My wife and I, we met with Pastor Gagliano, and just, had been praying about this and kind of told him that, we wanted to get back into full-time Christian ministry. The past couple of years I've worked in construction, and it's been great. It's been a great learning experience for me and such, but it's obviously different. I remember Pastor was very kind of, blunt with me there. He's like, well, you're called to this, not to construction. And so we prayed and talked, and again, not even necessarily, here, but just, that the Lord bring opportunities. Some of you that know my background, a few years ago, we made a decision to leave here and move to Georgia. And obviously for me, it's been real easy to make the comparisons. All right, Georgia, this happened, this happened, this happened. Now Texas, this happened, this happened, this happened. And, you want to live in the past and stuff, but to be honest, the whole Georgia move for my family and I obviously didn't work out. Hence, 1 year later, we're back here. And so kind of going into this next decision, it's going to sound awful, but we didn't want to kind of maybe make the same mistakes if it was a mistake. Right. We wanted to be a little more in tune with what God really wanted for us and kind of get ourselves out of the way.
Amen.
And, prayed with Pastor, and probably around Christmas time I had a phone call from someone that I knew in Christian education in North Carolina, and kind of went through that interview process and stuff, and it wasn't a fit. I mean, ultimately, it wasn't a fit. And, I was a little disappointed, obviously. Oh, this is it. Here we go. We're looking at the little town, and we're going to live, blah, blah, blah. And, that wasn't it. And, maybe a couple months after that, probably more in February, March, when Christian schools are starting to look for people, my wife got a Facebook message from an acquaintance in Fort Worth, Texas. And hey, can her husband call your husband? What's his phone number? And you just kind of go through the process. 5-minute phone call turns into an hour-and-a-half phone call. A week later, we're flying out there to check out the ministry and such, and the Lord just continually worked things out through that process. And ultimately, we've obviously made the decision to move to Texas, and it's just amazing to see how God worked through all that. And look, moving your family cross country is a big decision. I get that, but every decision we make that has consequences of some sort,
yes,
it's not always about the decision, right? It's about, am I in the place to even make this decision?
Yep.
And fortunately for a lot of us, God doesn't bring things up for us that we're not in a position to handle, because we haven't prepared ourselves. And again, if this is the word of the day, right? Prepare yourself for that. And as we kind of went through this process and knew that making a commitment to get back into full-time ministry would probably require moving some distance. I started looking for what other people that had kind of gone through some of that, what they had done and what they have said. And one of the guys I kind of came across was Pastor Kerry Schmidt, who's now at Emmanuel Baptist in Connecticut, but had served for years out in California, and made a decision to move his family cross country to take over this pastorate in Connecticut. And there were a lot of similarities for me. And there, other parts of his story included cancer and such. And I'm not going to tell his story and stuff, but some of the things that he talked about that he and his family had to do were very fitting for my family and I. And I use the story of Gideon here just because throughout this process, I kind of put out my fleece, if you would, a couple times and see if God would do what I was kind of asking him to do. And ultimately he did. And so here we are with our house mostly packed, our garage packed up, and moving here in a couple days. But just some thoughts about doing, making right decisions, or again, being in a position to make a decision. And there are kind of 5 things that Pastor Smith talked about that you need to have as you come to the decision-making process. Not things you need to find because, oh man, I've been given this opportunity, I'm going to move my family to fill in the blank. I better go ahead and get these things. No. You need these things now for your daily Christian walk.
Amen.
And if you don't have these things, I'll be honest, hopefully God doesn't give you some type of huge decision that you have to make, because you're probably not ready. And it was convicting and challenging to me to try to get, have these things in my life. And the first one was talked about was a sober mind. You don't got to flip there, but Titus chapters really 1 and 2, that phrase, that idea of sober-mindedness is talked about for a variety of different people. And it's just the idea of having maturity, having a seriousness about your life, having a clear head. And for me, sometimes that's pretty easy to clear my mind, and to also be sensible. I mean, as men, we really ought to be sober-minded.
Amen.
And it kind of leads into the second thought here of a pure heart. Matthew chapter 5, verse 8, pretty clear that we're supposed to have a pure heart. And, when you combine that with a sober mind, you talk about having a pure heart, what those two things ought to do is they ought to keep us from making decisions or doing anything for that matter that has a real less impact based just on our feelings, our desires, and emotions. I mean, a great thought here. Listen, worldly decisions are based on your emotions, your feelings, and your desires.
Yeah. Right.
And way too often in Christian lives, we allow our feelings, our emotions, our desires to dictate what we do.
Right.
That's not a pure heart. That's a selfish heart.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of verses in the Bible that talk about our flesh and stuff and how we should, stay away from the leading of it. But yet we see it so many times. I want this, and obviously in American culture, it's only getting worse. And so as Christians, a sober mind, pure heart. Again, that's not just to make a decision, that's just in general. You need to have these things. Listen, a pure heart allows you to make the proper judgment and to hopefully ultimately surrender to God's will as that decision comes along. Number 3, and we'll turn to Joshua chapter 1 on this one here. Joshua chapter 1, read a few verses here, verses 5 through, verses 6 through, I'll skip 8 and go to 9. Some of you kind of already know where I'm going with this, but verse 6 says, Joshua 1, verse 6, "Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them." Verse 7, "Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to the law which Moses my servant commanded thee." Skip down to verse 9. "Have not I commanded thee, be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest."
Amen.
Hey, do you think Joshua was afraid?
Yes.
I mean, I've got like 5 kids, I think, 5 kids. And if I have
Nice
to
time to check.
constantly tell them something, hey, you're too loud, hey, you're too wild, hey, stop screaming as you run through the house, stop running through the house also, and you repeatedly tell the kid the same thing over and over and over again, they probably have a problem with it. Okay, and obviously it needs to be dealt with. And look at Joshua is afraid. And without going into his whole story, he probably had a pretty good reason to be afraid, to be nervous. Sometimes we say nervous, well, I'm really anxious and stuff. Where those are all cover words, the fact that you're scared.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's okay as a Christian to have some fear.
Right.
Amen.
Because you know what fear does? Fear allows you to trust God.
Amen.
Right? And so number 3 here is a courageous spirit. And I know that's not necessarily something you think about as far as my decision making. I need to be courageous in my decision. It's not about the decision, right? It's about handling the fear that comes with any decision of magnitude. Look, Joshua obviously struggled with fear. God told him, 3-4 times just in that passage that we actually get to take a look at. And I'm sure there was more. Look, again, fear is normal. It's okay. But look, having courage is not the absence of the fear. Right?
Amen.
Courage is the will to act in spite of it.
Amen.
Okay? And for me, living somewhere I have literally been 72 hours. And if it was just me, yeah, no big deal. But it's not just me.
Right.
I've got 6 other people coming along.
Amen.
Honestly, I've got extended family that is affected by this decision. There's some fear. There will be fear as I'm driving the truck to that, and the first day, and the people we meet, and the families we meet and stuff. It's just there. But having a courageous spirit isn't an absence of fear. It's just, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do what God has told me to do in spite of the fear, and He's going to help me with it.
Amen.
Amen.
And again, this isn't stop being afraid. This is, hey, if you're fearful, great. God's probably trying to do something with you.
Amen. Amen. That's good.
And instead of running away from it or avoiding the decision, man, here it is. You've obviously done some things right. Now let's go ahead and continue with the process here. So, sober mind, pure heart, courageous spirit, wisdom. Obviously, a ton of verses in the Bible about godly wisdom and such. And look, wisdom in the decision-making process has the idea of understanding that, hey, I don't just want what I think. I don't just want my perspective. Because I'm very limited. I have good eyesight. Oh, the Lord's blessed you with, brains and stuff. I got some former students here. I had them all fooled to think they thought I knew everything. No, I didn't know everything. But I only talk about things that I do know about. And so if they ask me something I didn't know, just kind of rabbit trail around into something I did know. Oh man, Mr. Gonzalez, he's so smart. No, I just know I'm going to say something I'm not sure if it's true, right? That's not really godly wisdom, though. Okay, that's just, street smarts. I don't know what that is. All right. But it's wisdom. And look, wisdom from God's viewpoint is about getting His perspective. I remember as a teenager, my soccer coach took a few of us to Chicago. And I grew up a little north of Detroit. And Detroit's a big city and stuff there, but they're revitalizing Detroit right now. But it was dumb, right? And so we took us to Chicago. We went to Chicago to go see the Detroit Tigers play the Chicago White Sox and such because, Kaminsky was a much nicer ballpark than Old Tiger Stadium, right? And so we went there. It was real neat. I heard Chicago, man, Chicago's big. So we're driving in, on the freeway or whatever they call it there. And you can see the city, man, that's really cool. And we're down in the city and we're walking around and the buildings are tall and stuff. And it's really cool. Man, this city is really big. This is what I thought. And so we went up to the Sears, now Willis Tower. And went up to the 103rd story. And now they have like a crazy sky deck where you can walk outside and yeah, I'm good on that. By the time it was just a bunch of windows and stuff. And you get up there, you get to the 103rd floor of a building in a city of millions of people, and you realize how big the city is. Because you can see 4 states. And as cool as my perspective was on the ground, looking up and looking around and all the people, it is an entirely different viewpoint when you're up there.
That's right. Amen.
Because I'm limited. And that perspective, that is having God's wisdom. Knowing that, man, my little tunnel vision here, man, I'm moving to Weatherford, Texas. That's all I see. God's up there saying, man, Brandon, I got you.
Amen.
Okay? I see it all, man.
Amen.
I see it all, Brandon. I know you can't, and Brandon, you probably never will. But as you go, perspective's going to open up, especially as I stay. with godly wisdom, right?
Amen.
So my perspective, hey, another thing about God's perspective compared to mine, I can be wrong, right?
That's right.
We can be wrong. We can make mistakes. We are imperfect beings. I don't want to make every decision myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to mess up. Should have followed me around on some construction sites. Yeah, let's see what these plans say here. I got a little bit of understanding and stuff, and I mean, not enough, right? But anyway, numbers. So I got sober mind, pure heart, courageous spirit, wisdom. Last one here, faith. Hebrews 11:1, and obviously other verses as well. But you have to expect that faith, some amount of faith, how about that, is going to be involved in every major decision you make. And again, these aren't things that, oh man, I got to make a decision, I better go get wisdom and faith. You better already have it.
Amen.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we got a lot of Christians walking around doing whatever they want to do, following their own desires, emotions, their own wills and stuff. And then when they see an opportunity, it's like, oh man, I gotta figure out what God's wisdom is. I gotta figure out what faith is. I'm not saying it's too late, because obviously there are probably people in the Bible who can look at, man, they really weren't doing what they're supposed to do, but God still used them. I get it. But we don't have to be that way.
Amen.
Right? And if you get these things taken care of, and so if you have all those things, you still have to make the decision.
That's right.
At some point, I still had to tell the administrator there, hey, we're going to come. And it's almost like that's a whole nother thing. You got to get ready for the possibility of making a decision. Then you actually have to do it. Just a few thoughts here. No verse, and I'll be finished here. But number one, you have to refuse to trust yourself. I get it. We make a decision. I'm a pros and cons kind of guy. Like, all right, bad, good. That has its place. But that's me. That's me and my wife looking at it. And I'm wrong. There needs to be a little bit of that. I go back to, sober mind. There's got to be some sensibility in there. I'm not going to take an internship and not getting paid. See, this is the place for me. There's some sensibility that has to go into it too. But man, you have to take yourself out of it. That was one of the hardest things for me. And my wife would tell you as well. Just to get ourselves out of the way for once. Stop trusting in what we think. And not that we've been taught well. But man, trusting in God. Refuse to trust myself. Number two, seek and surrender God's will. I've done these 5 things before. I'm ready. Here's this opportunity. I'm not going to trust myself. And I'm going to be willing to surrender to what God has for me. And it may not be to accept, in my case, the position in Texas. I mean, it was in my case, but you got to be willing to, right? Number 3, then you pray about it. It's hard to pray about making a decision you don't know what your decision possibility even is. Prayer is way on the line. Obviously, you need to have a prayer life. We're going to take some time to pray here in a few minutes and such. But man, once you presented the opportunity, you got to pray about it. And not some flippant prayer. So, how do I pray about it? There's a lot of different examples in the Bible on how to pray. Some of them, it's just like grunting and stuff because the person didn't even know what to say. God knows, though. God knows when you are taking some time to try to communicate with Him in some way. Don't worry about having the perfect prayer.
Amen.
But man, here's the decision.
Amen.
You better pray about it. And strongly recommend this too, to seek godly wisdom and counsel. Be aware, though, that probably all the godly wisdom and counsel isn't going to line up. I mean, the more people you talk to about this decision that you're going to try to make, the more likely it is 1 or 2 of them don't necessarily agree with you. That's tough. But man, you need to be sure you're putting yourself, you're presenting what God's giving you an opportunity to decide on with other people that you know will pray for you and give you wisdom and counsel and give, maybe a perspective that God shows to them and stuff. But these are all things that I had to do, and then kind of am still doing in some cases, if you want to look at it that way, with that to make such a decision. Ultimately, my family and I, we love this place.
Amen. Amen.
We're gonna miss it. But that's what the Lord has for me.
Amen.
Amen, brother.
Praise God.
And I'm super excited to do it.
Amen.
Just not right now. And I blame Johnny for bringing up this one. But man, do these things all the time. Not just when, we need to build a building. Let's all get a sober mind. Too late.
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You need men in this church to be in a position that God can say, here's what I need this ministry to do.
Amen.
That's right.
Not, hey guys, have a little faith. We need to be beyond that. Don't get me wrong. There are ministries in our church designed to help people to grow their faith, but man, there needs to be men in the church that already have it.
Amen.
Already have godly wisdom. And, this place has that. And it's evidence all around us, not just in physical buildings and stuff, but the impact this ministry has here and across the world.
Yes.
And I know it's going to continue on, and I'm sad to leave it. But at the same time, I'm excited to go where God has for me and my family.
Amen.
And to pray for us. It's been an eventful couple weeks. I took the job back in April, and it's just kind of dragging a little bit. I love you guys and everything, but when you leaving? When you leaving? When you leaving? Do you need anything? Hey, it's just, and I'm thankful for it, but man, it just kind of keeps dragging.
Amen.
Thank you guys. If you don't mind, I'd like to pray with you real quick. And
Yes.
I'll turn it back over
Yes.
to John. Father, we do. Thank you that you give us opportunities to serve you, opportunities to test our faith, if you would, much like you did with Gideon, Joshua, and such. And Lord, I pray that we be in a position to make decisions and to, as we're walking with you and as we're fellowshipping with you, that you would give us opportunities to grow our spiritual life, and that you'd be very clear with us about what you have for each one of us and our families and such. Lord, I pray that we would be the men that we need to be when it comes to decision making, that we would, include our wives and even our children at times at the same time, understand the importance that, man, I need to be sober-minded. I need to have a pure heart. I need to be courageous. I need to already have wisdom and faith, Lord, so you can show me what you have for me next. And Lord, I thank you for these men. I thank you for this time you've given me to share with them. And Lord, we love you. In your name we pray. Amen.